This is River of Living Water Revival School. Today we are going to look at the learning curriculum, some aspects of the school learning curriculum. And our question that is before us today is, does the learning curriculum activate the internal potential? In this channel, I've talked a lot about the internal potential, the fact that people are created in the image of God and the likeness of God. And it means that within our internal personality, there are great potentials that have not been activated, that have not been realized. And so we expect that that our learning curriculum, our time that we spend in school, from preschool time until tertiary education, we expect that what we engage in the whole of the schooling process, for example, 12 years up to the secondary level and up to almost 17 years, 15 to 17 years in the tertiary level. And we expect that this interaction with data and focus on schooling and learning will actually activate our internal resource, so that after we get out of school, at whatever level, we would be able to interact with the external resources so that we can create something profitable and also create a service system that we can use as an occupation. So our question before us today is, does the learning curriculum activate the internal potential? We are going to look at a few issues which will help us to address this question. In this picture which is before us, we are going to look at the keys to guide our thought process. We have said in the first image that we want to look into the question. Does the learning curriculum activate internal potential? And we are going to look at various issues. So these are the keys that we are going to look at in this discussion to guide our thought process. We are going to look at 7 points. 7 points as numbered in this picture. Number 1, what does my certificate tell you? What does my certificate tell you? Obviously, what does my certificate tell you about my performance? Number 2, rote learning strategy. Rote learning strategy. We are going to look at the issues concerning the rote learning strategy that we have heard so much about in this country. Number 3, my certificate is silent about this. We will discuss about various issues that the certificate is silent about. Number 4, does rote learning strategy activate creative resource? Does rote learning strategy activate creative resource? Number 5, in this picture, we are going to look at the story in graphics. We are trying to dig up and present a story that is happening within our society. And we have here used, in this picture, I have used graphics to try and paint that picture. That is why it is a story, the story in graphics. Number 6, activate resource center. Activate resource center as an option which should be married with the rote learning strategy during the study process of the curriculum. Number 7, what's your What's your take on this? What's your take on this? All of us as people of this country, we have experienced and we know the difficulties that our children are facing in this country. We know we parents, siblings, fellow colleagues, we know the status and the situation which is facing our country, and in which actually is a really a time bomb. It is really a time bomb. And so this we are seeing is a community issue. It is a community matter. That's why I'm throwing this matter also to you so that you may give it a thought and maybe you can indicate your comments. Your comments are welcome in this video. What's your take on this? Welcome. So we are first of all going to look at this aspect of the certificate, and we are asking ourselves, what does my certificate tell you? What does my certificate tell you? When I present my certificate to you, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for an opportunity into a tertiary level or vacancy. What does my certificate, which I present to you from my primary level, my certificate from my secondary level, or my certificate from the tertiary level, colleges and the universities, what does it tell you? And we have said that normal curriculum will always confer certificates. Normal curriculum at every level, from primary level to tertiary level, or whatever small courses that one take, one is always conferred with a certificate. And a certificate is actually a testimonial. A certificate just certifies, that the student has gone through a program. So a certificate is a representation of a certain curriculum through which a student have passed through at a certain institution and a certain authority. And so the stamp of the school authority certifies that. So this certificate certifies that one has been exposed to a certain curriculum. One has been certified, for example, to the primary curriculum or secondary curriculum or the tertiary level curriculum, depending on the category and the specialization of that curriculum. It also certifies that one has been exposed to a certain information fields. The certificate also indicates a list of information fields to which the student has been exposed to. So this certificate certifies that one has been exposed to these fields. The certificate also shows how well one has recorded data inside. The certificate also, according against the list of the information fields, the certificate will always indicate also a list of the grades or the marks or the qualifications or how the student has qualified in different fields. And depending on the grading on the data, we can say that it also shows how well one has recorded the data, because the certificate indicates the data for various information fields. The certificate also shows how well reproduced for the examiner. So this data also will tell us if the student has certified the requirements of the examiner, how well the student has certified the requirements of the examiner. The certificate also shows areas where one has put more effort or one is best in. So the certificate is also able to tell you, to tell the party who is looking at my certificate, It is able to tell that person, that authority, what area, I'm best in, whether I'm good in the sciences, whether I'm good in humanities, whether I'm good in the creative arts, or whether I'm good in the arts. So these are much of the information that the certificate is able to tell the person, the authority to whom the certificate is presented. The next issue that we are going to look at is the rote learning strategy. The rote learning strategy. The rote learning strategy. And we want to see what is the rote learning strategy. We are saying that the rote learning strategy deals with raw data. It deals with raw data. For example, when a student goes through the primary level and the secondary level, we know that a lot of information is introduced to the student. Either it is geography, it is history, it's science, biology, arts. All these are new information. This is all new information that is presented to the student so that the student can absorb it, can understand it, can record it, and retain it, and present it to the examiner. So all this information is raw information. It's just like in a manufacturing a system where you need raw materials so that you take the raw materials through a processing line to the specific product that you want to make. So the raw materials through the process of the processing procedure, then the raw materials are converted into a product. For example, in the manufacturing of cakes, in manufacturing of soap, in manufacturing of very many products that require several ingredients to be put together. So what we are saying is that what the student will receive from the primary level and again from the secondary level is mainly raw data. We also obviously have places where the student goes through the practical classes. But in essence, all of it, the practical classes, is just part of the presentation and the demonstration of the meaning of the raw data. We are also saying that in the rote learning strategy, the student receives and works. The student receives the raw data and works hard to learn the raw data. So most of the work of the student is to present themselves to be taught or to present themselves to read, and also to exert time and energy to learn, to understand, and to comprehend the raw data. And also, the other thing that the student works hard to do is to record it in the database and also to master it. So the student is supposed to present themselves to class. So that is why there is a register of the students who present, how many hours has a student attended class in a year. So the student present themselves to receive the information, the raw data. They work hard to learn the raw data, and they also record it in the database, and they also master it. They are supposed to master it so that they can reproduce it in the exams. Reproduce it in the exams and satisfy the examiner according to the syllabus. According to the syllabus. And so what we are saying, in the rote learning strategy, the student will give the information to the examiner the way it was given and learned according to the syllabus, because the syllabus is asked for the raw data. How this is the raw data that is supposed to be presented to the students. And it is the student's responsibility to learn it and to keep it. And at the end of the period, the student will be examined, will be assessed whether they have really presented themselves in the correct number of hours or they have presented themselves to learn the raw data and they have retained it. So the syllabus demands just that the student masters the raw data. And the purpose of the examination is to determine whether the student was capable of retaining and recording all that data. And at the end of it, the student will get a certificate for accurate retainment and reproduction of the certificate. The grades on the certificate indicate how the student retained the data and also how the student reproduced it to the examiner. But you know that the examiner does not assess outside the syllabus. So in the rote learning strategy, the examiner does not assess anything else outside the syllabus. So therefore, what we are saying is that we are talking about the certificate because the certificate represents a certain curriculum through which the students go through. And we have seen the previous slides, what they have talked about the certificate. And this time we are going to look at what the certificate is silent about. My certificate is silent about the following. And although the certificate is able to tell a lot about the student's performance and their exposure and the subject fields that they were exposed to, and their degree and intensity of engagement with the subjects and their ability to retain and their preferences, we are also saying that, however, we are also saying that there are some things that the certificate is silent about. The silent is silent about the following. We are saying that the certificate does not show how the student worked out and translated the raw data. The certificate does not show how the student worked out and translated the raw data to another format. So the certificate, when you look at the certificate, it does not tell us of how well the student was able to translate the raw data that they received and translate it to another information. What it means to translate the data to another format, is to say that the student was able to interact with some stimuli. The students was able to interact with the data in another way so that they can process it into another format. We know the student internal processing system is actually able to do this processing. The certificate also does not show the student's prowess at synthesizing new from the curriculum. Again, we are saying that we have seen that the student really what they receive in the rote learning strategy is raw data, And the students throughout the years works hard to learn the raw data, to correct it from the teacher and from the books, from research, and record it within their system and reproduce it for the examiner to satisfy the curriculum. So that whole is actually raw data. And so the certificate does not show the student's prowess at synthesizing new from the curriculum. It does not show us that this student was able to take the raw data and again process it into something new. So the certificate also does not show how the student can use this information. It does not tell us how the student could use the raw information received all these years and bring about innovation, bring about solutions or advancing modes of the information. So what we are saying is that the certificate which actually shows the data of how the raw data was retained and worked, how the raw data was received, retained, and reproduced. It does not show us how how the student is able to process that raw data into another format through the processes of information, how innovation, how the student can interact with the raw data and innovate, create something, something, innovate a solution, or even advanced modes of that data. And there could be, because of this, there could be an abortion taking place in the society because the potential development process in the students is not completed. In front of us is a graphic representation, and this is a graphic representation of the stories that we are trying to create. We are trying to create a story to answer our question or to evaluate the question, does the learning strategy activate the internal potential of a student? Does the learning curriculum activate the internal potential or the active resource center within a student? And this is just a schematic graphic way of trying to represent that story, trying to represent our words in a graphic manner, trying to represent our thoughts in a graphic manner. And here, this graphic represents two systems. It represents the schooling curriculum that we have been talking about. And it also gives us another option, the option to activate the creative resource center. And we realize that actually from the advanced nations, we know that we cannot separate these two processes. The schooling curriculum of learning raw data, the schooling curriculum of learning raw data. We cannot say it is not relevant and it is not important because a student needs to learn information of their environment, advance it. But they also need to also be able to use their internal capacity, the capacity of processing capacity, which is within them, to interact with that raw data. We have seen that the rote learning strategy gives the student raw data. So mainly the schooling curriculum, what you give the student is raw data. But we also need the creative resource center or the internal potential which is within every student to interact with that raw data, and learn and develop skills to advance that raw data, to process that raw data into forms that are usable in daily life, to forms that are usable in the environment, to forms that are able to apply and use the external resources that are available. And so we have seen that this schooling curriculum provides a certain kind of certificates, and there are many things that the certificate does not tell. And we have seen that in many years of working out the school learning curriculum, we have ended up with many students, very many students over the years. We have ended up with millions of jobless students who do not even who have not completed their tertiary education. And these are students who today are doing small jobs somewhere. They are doing small jobs somewhere, and they are struggling with the small businesses somewhere, and they have been left alone. They are really working on their own, struggling with life, disappointed, disillusioned, through after many years of learning, even up to university level, after spending 17 years through the schooling system in this country, the student finds themselves unable to advance themselves or even unable to use the information they have learned for all these years to work it into any other format. There are few small percentage of students every year who pass through the tertiary education and also enter the job market. We realize that most of these also enter the tertiary education, also end up jobless. Many students from many colleges that we have in the country, many students from the universities, they end up with no education and without any jobs, and they end up doing some small job somewhere or doing this and that. And so we are saying they are obviously, this is brought about, one, by obviously curriculum limitations. The limitations of the curriculum, what we have seen that our raw data, our rote learning strategy of correcting raw data, learning raw data, and reproducing this raw data from the examiner does not activate the internal creative resource center. And so there is great limitation to the student who come out from this curriculum after the end of the term. And so we have so many students out in the field who have not completed their tertiary education, and we are saying that the potential development process has not been completed. And we can say is that the learning and the developmental process has aborted. And this is obviously a great waste in human capital. Nationally, this is a great waste in in a human capital. So what we are saying, although this process to activate the Creative Resource Center for the student was not engaged in the curriculum during the learning process, it is possible that a learning system could be created to facilitate these students to activate their internal creative resource, to empower them to interact with the internal resources and also interact with the external resources in the environment. And most likely provide advanced and well thought out and long and self-employment that can be long term, that it can be grown with the time, that it can grow to something which they can also use to employ others. So we are saying that we need a creative resource developmental system, where we can engage all our students who are in the market, frustrated, disillusioned, wondering whether there is anybody who can ever help them, wondering where a sponsor can come from, wondering what the government is doing for them or what the society is doing for them. And we are saying we really don't have to wait for the government to do this. This is a community problem. And we have many people who are qualified to create the required this curriculum. Because what we need is an advancing learning program. It's an advancing learning program that can facilitate these students to make use of the learning data that they have learned in school for so many years. So there are many entrepreneurs and many creators and innovators who are able to interact with this problem that is facing our workforce, our young workforce in this country. There are many creators, entrepreneurs, and innovators who are able to ask them questions. How can I provide solutions? How can I provide solutions to this problem? What is required? What kind of curriculum is required? What is required? What kind of training? What kind of information is required by these students so to help them to activate their internal potential? So we have seen that it is very critical that during the running process, that the students collect the raw data. They are given the raw data, learn the raw data, but in the process of learning, within the period that they are in the school, it is very important that they should be able, their creative resource center or their internal potential should be able to engage with that data. By the end of the term, it means that we are releasing students who have learned skills of how to use stimuli or other resources, interact with it, and translate it into another format. So we are saying that the curriculum, the syllabus, should demand that the student is able to interact with every data in every field and bring an advancing form of it. And we are saying that when a student advances in a certain curriculum, when the student is advancing in their curriculum, the internal processing system, every person has an internal processing system. Every person has a creative resource center or an internal potential which receives the data and because of various modes of demand placed on the creative center. The creative center engages its internal processing system to facilitates the person to advance the knowledge and the skills that are learned. So we are saying that the student on their own is able to advance the data depending on various demands placed on their system. They are able to advance that knowledge and the skills they have learned. And what you say is that when a student is developed and skilled and trained in this way, we are saying that they will learn the ability, they will learn and they will express the ability of entrepreneurial process. They will show that they have the ability to undergo or to interact with their internal entrepreneurial process. The entrepreneurial process is a process that is engaged by the internal creative system to engage with a certain stimulus or certain data and works that data out into some other format. And we have seen this a lot in people who we are called entrepreneurs. We say that business people are entrepreneurs. But this is a process which can be run by the students through the schooling process. By the time they finish their secondary and tertiary and even primary terms or levels, they should be able to engage with the data and resources in one way or another. And we know that renowned innovators and creators, they are even known to have left school early. And I'm giving the example of people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. We know these are people who did not complete their levels, their secondary levels and college levels of learning, because in their process of learning in school, they interacted with a stimulus within school, and their creative resource center, their potential was greatly activated. Their potential was greatly stimulated, and they said they were able to identify something that they really liked and they could engage in all their life. And so, although we don't necessarily encourage students, we don't encourage students to leave school before they have completed, because it's important to complete the whole curriculum and get the testimonials. We have seen these rare cases of those who do not complete the schooling process, but they start working out. They start working out on a stimulus, and they continue advancing that stimulus to something very complex and to service products that are able to help the societies. And here we are saying that a developed internal creative center. If students in the process of 12 years in school or 8 years in school or 17 years in the schooling system, if the students were able, a certain demand was placed on their internal potential to handle the data in a certain way, or they were expected to translate the data in a certain way, we say that those years would have skilled their internal capacity, their internal creative capacity, and would say that their internal creative center would be advanced and developed to handle the data in a different way and process the data in a different format. So we are saying that there as such a developed internal creative center enables the person to easily use their internal resource. It easily enables the person or the student to use their internal resource to interact with external resources. And one of the problems that we have in our curriculum is that the millions and the millions of the students that have come out of it, many of them are not able to use their internal resource and interact with their external resource and work it out and advance it into another format. I have worked with the young students who have come from our curriculum in the secondary level, and I have realized that these students, you really need a lot of time with these students. You really need a lot of time with these students, but some of them are not even willing to do the thinking work. They don't want to think. They have not been trained to think. And so even when you leave them to do a job that they need to think on their own, at times it becomes very difficult. And you may find that you may enter into quarrels with a student, but it is the problem is the schooling process, is the curriculum that the student has gone through. And you find that there's a lot of complaints in this era concerning the students that are coming from our curriculum. They are not able to deliver in the workplace. They are not able to deliver in the workplace. And even when they are trained, they don't want to do the hard work. They want the easy work, which you chew it up for them and lay it before them. They don't know how to use the internal resource to work out what is expected of them, or even to be creative and impress their employers or their bosses by their internal power. So a student whose internal creative resource center has been well developed is able to use the internal resource, interact with the external resources and work it, advance it, and use it profitably, and use it as a profitable service providing occupation. So what we are saying is that the student is able to engage in the entrepreneurial process. If they can't get a job and they are not able to advance in their study, it means that their internal system is well capable of advancing the external resources into a profitable service providing occupation. And so what we are saying that the creative resource center developmental system is a big option. It's a big option which is required for the millions of students who are already outside school, millions of the students who are still outside school. We need a system, a creative resource system to help develop the creative resource center or internal potential within the students of those who have left school already. Yeah, I have a last picture here. I have a last picture here because I want to be able to assess whether we are able to been able to communicate in this difficult question. So I'm asking you, what is your take on this? Have I communicated? Have I communicated? Have I shed some light that could help us answer the question that we have at the beginning? Does our learning curriculum activate the internal potential of the students who have gone through it, of so many students that have gone through it and are there out there in the market expecting that something will come by. Mm? Through this presentation, do we see the power? Do we see the power and the presence of the resource center within us as a resource or as a potential or possible to be developed and to be activated? Do we see the power and the presence of the resource center from what we have talked about? Have I expressed the differences in the two systems clearly and crisply? Also, I say that these processes should not be separated. These processes should be married together in the learning curriculum of the students. There were rote learning strategy, that is the receiving and the delivery comprehension of the raw data. The time it is being received, the process of placing a demand on the internal potential, on the capacity of the student. There is a way that a demand should be placed on the potential of the student to translate that information to another format that is most likely relevant in the environment and usable in the environment they are in. So do we realize the need to stimulate the children's thinking and imagination, Ari? Does this presentation help us to realize that we need to stimulate our children's thinking and imagination, Ari? And this is one thing that we have been warned greatly, because our children spend a lot of time in the computers, with the computers playing games, or even with the smartphones playing games and communicating with friends. But there is very little that the children these days engage in within the home environment. The home and family environment is an environment that provides a very broad pool. It's a very rich pool of stimuli. There's a lot of stimuli in the home and family setting, in the day-to-day activities, in the day-to-day demands of every life. There are so much stimuli that the parents could use with the children to help the children be engaged and start stimulating them early, even before they enter into the learning curriculum. So are we now able to see, as the students engage with the data, as they engage with the data at every level, are we able to see the two issues clearly? Why it is so important to marry the two learning processes, so that our students, by the time they come out of complete their studies, they are ready. So we are saying here, as a conclusion to this work, that activation of creative resource center during the learning process, activation of creative resource center during the learning process would greatly facilitate students' capacity development. So we are saying that this development of activation of the creative resource during the learning process, by placing various demands on this system, would greatly facilitate students' capacity and also enhance their developmental process. With that, we come to the end of this question. What we have seen is that, according to how we looked at in a few slides earlier, we see that the rote learning strategy does not activate the internal potential. And that is why we have so many students out there not able to advance themselves the course of their lives, because they are not able to use all the information they have learned over the years. They are not able to use it to interact with their environment. And so we are saying the rote learning strategy on its own is not able to activate the internal potential. And so we need to add the strategy. We need to develop a syllabus that places a greater demand on the students, a greater demand on the internal capacity of the student to interact with that data and be able to examine whether the student has been able to achieve or develop their internal system in that way. Thank you very much. And I hope that this slide has opened something new about our lives.